Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Waxman-Bakshi. Today is December 29th, 2024, and let me remind you that 100 Israelis, including 2 young children, women, and elderly, are still in captivity for 450 days. This is the live daily briefing of the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's Office. Hospitals are where Hamas is. Hamas's doctor hid hundreds of murderers in his Hamas hospital. 240 Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists were caught in Gaza's Kamal Adwan hospital. Kamal Adwan hospital was an official Gaza military hospital run by a colonel. How do we know? Gaza's government and media openly posted online. Who were Gaza's military and government? Gaza's military were Hamas and Islamic Jihad terror armies. Gaza's government was Hamas. The Kamal Adwan Hamas hospital head was a doctor and a colonel in Hamas. Hamas's murderers hid behind hundreds of Gazan patients intentionally. Last year, Kamal Adwan's then head was also caught. He admitted to being a Hamas general. He explained, Hamas hide in the hospital because they know it is a safe place where they won't be targeted. Hospitals should be safe from war, but Hamas wants them safe for war. Thousands of Hamas and Islamic Jihad were caught in Gaza's hospitals since October 7th. Israel's forces evacuated 450 patients and staff from the Hamas hospital to another facility before and during the terrorist capture this week. And guess what? Israel was condemned for that too, for getting innocent patients out of harm's way. Israel also brought tens of thousands of tons of aid to help the other hospital with the new patients. In November, 100 Hamas murderers barricaded themselves in that very hospital. In March, 500 Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists were caught and 200 were killed at Gaza's Shifa hospital. Also, Hamas used Gaza's hospitals to hold hostages they abducted on October 7th. Earlier today, Israel struck Hamas aerial defense units. Where were they based? The former Al-Waha hospital. Thankfully, there were no patients there. But we can expect headlines, again, screaming about Israel striking hospitals. Remember, Israeli soldiers keep entering Gaza's hospitals because Hamas keeps hiding in them. Terrorists don't get immunity just because they hide in the basement of a hospital. Hamas cannot return to power, or they'll again try murdering Israel's people from behind Gaza's people. Here's some background about hospitals and the rules of war. One of the fundamental aims of the laws of armed conflict is the protection of hospitals, ambulances, and medics from attack. International law grants this group special protection from attack during active combat. Hamas and other Iranian terror proxies use these protected areas to launch attacks on Israel's people in the hopes that Israel will be less likely to try stopping them and to draw international condemnation of Israel when it does have to act to protect its people. Israel will keep trying to reduce harm to civilians and to only attack military targets in accordance with international law. When Hamas uses medical facilities and vehicles for attacks, they lose their protection and may be targeted to stop those attacks in accordance with the requirements of international law. Hamas's use of hospitals as military bases puts everyone in danger. Hamas continues to indiscriminately attack the people of Israel. On Saturday, Hamas fired 2 long-range rockets from northern Gaza towards Jerusalem. Sirens went off in the region and Israelis had to run for shelter. Also on Saturday, the Houthi army of pirates fired a ballistic missile at Israel. Sirens went off in the middle of the night. Millions of people in Israel woke up and ran to their shelter or their stairway or wherever they could find cover at the moment. The missile was intercepted, but the threat of shrapnel and injury and death is very real. The remnants of Hamas want war. The Houthis in Yemen want war. Iran's regime that supports these groups want war. That's why there is a war. It would be better if there was peace. But there can't be peace as long as Iran's proxies like Hamas or the Houthis promise to carry out more October 7th massacres or actively try to murder Israel's people. The war launched by Hamas and other Iranian terror proxies will continue until they release the hostages and stop trying to murder us all. Now let's take some questions from our audience watching live on social media.
Thank you, Ashley. I know you follow the issue of the hostages very closely. Is there any news about the potential release of the hostages and any information about how they're being treated in Gaza?
So unfortunately, I don't have any news about the current situation with the hostages or a deal. We are continuing to listen to what is coming out from the media to try to understand where everything stands in terms of a deal. I will add, however, that Israel's health ministry presented a report to the UN based on hostages released from Hamas captivity. 2 children reported they were tied together and beaten. 2 other children had burn marks consistent with branding on their limbs. 2 teenage hostages described how they were made to perform sexual acts on each other. A woman reported that she was assaulted at gunpoint by a Hamas terrorist. Many hostages of all ages and genders described undergoing sexual abuse by Hamas captors. Children were forced to watch the October 7th murder videos. Hostages lost between 10 and 17% of their body weight. Some children lost 18% of their body weight and needed intensive care. Medical attention was withheld from many hostages, and at least 1 died from non-treatment. So when you ask me about the fate and the situation with the hostages, this report only takes into account what was reported from the released hostages a year ago. The remaining 100 hostages have been there for 450 days, and we can only hate to imagine what they are enduring.
Our next question is from YouTube. Can you please give an overview of the situation on Israel's northern border right now? Do you expect that the IDF will be remaining in Lebanon for the foreseeable future and also parts of Syria?
So I foresee that Israel will remain in position wherever it needs to remain in position. Part of the ceasefire agreement on Israel's northern border was that the Lebanese military was supposed to take position instead of Hamas, and that Hamas would demilitarize. Guess what? That has not happened. And so as long as the Hezbollah and Lebanese army don't withhold their end of the bargain, they don't carry out what they have agreed upon with the agreement, I foresee that Israel will be there to protect Israel's northern border, to protect the civilians of Israel's north, so that they can finally go back to their homes and we can keep the peace and calm in the region.
Our next question is from Danny Clifford, who writes on Instagram. He is asking about the status of the Iranian nuclear program. Is it so far along that it's a serious threat, and is Israel going to have to do something about it?
It has been so far along and a serious threat for quite some time. I would imagine that there are serious conversations happening between Israel's leadership and foreign leadership to see how and when we can deal with the situation. Of course, Israel will not agree to live under threat of an Iranian terror regime having nuclear capability. But it's important to add that it's not only Israel who is very fearful of this potential Iranian nuclear capability. It's also the moderate Arab countries here in the Middle East. So it is not only our fight, it is a joint fight. This will destabilize the entire region, the entire world. And therefore, it's important to understand that it's not Israel's fight alone. This really is something that I'm sure, even though I'm not sitting there in those meetings, I'm sure this is real talk, real discussion between global leaders on how to move forward.
Our next question is something that we get a lot on Instagram from people asking how to have better conversations about Israel and the war. People asking, how to deal with the question of, okay, I condemn Hamas for what they did on October 7th, but everything Israel has done since then is also a crime. How do you handle this?
Well, first of all, I always recommend having compassion, because we do have compassion for the other side. We have compassion for the children of Gaza and for the innocent people of Gaza who have been tortured by Hamas for close to 20 years. There is no political freedom in Gaza. There is no freedom of expression. There is no freedom of religion in Gaza. And minority groups have been persecuted against in Gaza for many years. Now, it is important to mention that, and this is what you should always come back to, always, as long as there are 100 hostages, innocent people who were literally taken from a music festival, from their beds, doesn't matter where they were taken from, as long as they are still there, of course, Israel will remain there. Israel will continue to fight. And Israel will not live with a terrorist organization running a mini state, a mini terror state on its border. So if you feel compassion, as I do, for the people of Gaza, for the children of Gaza, and you truly want a better future for them, you must call on them to immediately release the hostages and for Hamas to lay down its weapons and surrender. Because if those two things happen, all of the death, all of the destruction would literally end tomorrow. So it's important to understand that even though 1 year has passed, the hostages are still there. Hamas clearly still has capability. They are shooting rockets indiscriminately at Israeli citizens. So everything could end tomorrow with them understanding that the safety and security of their people is more important than their crazy objective of wiping out Israel and killing all the Jews.
We have time for two more questions, and the first of those two is from Benji on Instagram, who asks, is the IDF focusing on the Houthis now?
So certainly we have seen that the Israeli Air Force has struck the Houthis in Yemen. I wouldn't say they're focusing. I wouldn't say the shift the focus has shifted to the Houthis, because we are still on a 7-front war. We still very much, as mentioned earlier, need to protect our northern border, our border now with Syria. We still, we're yet to see if Syria, if the new regime, whatever it will look like, will remain in a ceasefire with Israel. We are still being, we have the West Bank as a front, we have the Iraqi militias, and of course we have Hamas, we have Iran. I mean, we've been blessed with a number of enemies. So of course we are dealing with all of them, but I wouldn't say the focus has shifted. The Houthis certainly are presenting a real threat and a real inconvenience, waking us up night after night, whether it's in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, or wherever it is. But it is important to mention that the Houthis are also a global threat. So they're a global threat on international waters and trading. And so we've seen not only Israel, but the United States striking in Yemen just this past weekend. So I believe, in going back to the previous question, I believe this is something that also we are discussing with our American and other foreign counterparts.
This is our last question today. It's the holiday of Hanukkah. How are you celebrating Hanukkah, and how do you assess the mood in Israel during this Hanukkah holiday?
So we're trying to stay happy and positive, but of course we're kind of unsuccessful. How am I celebrating? I'm, lighting the candles and eating donuts, much needed comfort carbs. But actually today, so many of you know, my cousin Agam Belgel, she is also held hostage. She's 20 years old in Gaza. And tonight we are joining the entire family, and we've invited other people to come together. We're going to be watching Agam's favorite movie, which is Bohemian Rhapsody. So we're trying to stay together as a family and stay positive, but we cannot really celebrate until, of course, they all come home. Thank you very much for watching. And remember, there is less than 1 week left to make your year-end gift. A generous donor is matching every donation up to $180,000, doubling your impact. Support the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's office and help us combat misinformation, empower allies, and ensure Israel's story is heard. Don't miss this chance. Every dollar counts twice. Click the link in our bio to make your contribution. Thank you very much for tuning in. We will, of course, be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Israel time, 8 a.m. East Coast time. Happy Hanukkah.